Welcome to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. Deep dives through the journey of youth sports, what parents experience, what coaches experience, and most importantly, what your kids experience. We'll also feature the latest information, tips, tools, and resources to help parents, coaches, and athletes navigate and improve the culture of youth sports. And now, the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast.
All right, welcome everybody back to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast, joined again by my partner Seth Taylor, and looking forward here to episode number 12, Act Like a Pro. I think we hear that and we think professional player of sports. To me, being a pro is more about how you behave and how you treat other people. Right. So differentiate that to start. Seth, what does it mean to act like a pro to you?
Yeah, so what we're talking about is a certain bridge that gets built between what we say we want and what we actually do, what our behaviors indicate. So to kind of lay this out, I talk about it in the journal, actually talking about this player that I was working with, and I've done this lots of times where I'm working with a player that says, I want to play at this level. So I was working with a youth player who's playing at a decent level, and he says, I want to play in college, right? Or it could be a college player that says, I want to play in the pros, right? You know, I've got several of those right now. I'm working with a lot of college players right now. And they say, I want to play there. And you can simply watch their behaviors and tell you whether they actually want that or not. So in all human beings, because there's a gap between our conscious and our subconscious, and because of the way the ego functions to try to protect us from what's in the subconscious, for most human beings, we tend to have a pretty large gap between what we believe and what we actually believe, right? What we want and what we actually want. So this kid was telling me he wanted to play college, and he's literally telling me, I want to be a college soccer player. And he literally explains to me while we're going over this session, and he's explaining to me how he fights with his parents every single day about everything. He's tanking in his grades because he doesn't care about school. He's like, school is stupid. I don't need that. He's drinking a Coke and eating a slice of pizza while he's telling me how he wants to be a college athlete. And you know, as a therapist guy, I'm clearly sitting there going, well, you know, clearly he doesn't actually want to be a college soccer player, right? His ego has created that as a narrative structure. Right. And so that's what we call fantasy. It's the difference between a fantasy and a dream. And we talked about this earlier in an earlier episode. Fantasy is here. I want to be a college soccer player because he likes the narrative structure in his mind. I want to be this great thing because that narrative gives him love, gives him comfort, gives him everything that he feels like he has to get to be okay. But his behaviors are saying, I want pleasure. I want safety. I want to be able to sit here and do nothing at all. I don't want to have to earn anything, which we can call lazy. I got a player say to me, I just feel like I'm lazy. I think, no, you're not lazy, man. What it is some part of you just wants to have the thing you needed as a baby, which is, I don't have to do anything. I just want to sit here and be loved. And so as we get older, that gets replaced with comfort and pleasure, right? So he has this pretty big gap. And my job, of course, is to help him bridge that gap. To act like a pro is when someone says, here's what I want. And then you watch them walk out the door and go execute the things necessary for that. So if someone says, I want to be a great soccer player, you go, okay, well, I had a player ask me that one time, very first session. I said, what's the goal? He says, I want to play for the Sounders. I said, oh, you want to be a pro? And he goes, yeah. I go, okay. I said, well, tell me what you did. I just said this. Tell me what you did today that got you one step closer to being a pro. And he just kind of paused and he's like, surely you understand that that's a difficult thing to do. And he says, yeah. What'd you do? And the best he could say is that, well, I played FIFA, which is a video game, right? He played some FIFA. Oh, okay. Okay. So, all right, what'd you do yesterday? And we just kind of went through it. My goal was to show him. Eventually he kind of realized, I told him, I said, can you see how like a part of you wants to be a professional player and a part of you just wants to be comfortable? And he's like, yeah, I can see that. I go, okay. So it's our job. If you actually want to do that, we have to bridge that gap right there, because the part of you that's actually dictating your actions is clearly more interested in a type of survival and a type of comfort. And that's how our egos protect us from what we carry in that trauma. So to act like a pro is to match your actions to what's coming out of your mouth. You say you want to be a pro, and you can see that, right? All the time, even at a pro level, I imagine, in a locker room, you see guys that say they want to be that $100 million guy, but they're not doing what's actually needed. You can see they're working harder to reinforce a certain narrative structure than they are actually becoming a better player.
Yeah, and I think for parents, not every one of your kids is going to be a pro. but I think we can all say we want our kids to grow up and do the things they say they're going to do.
Yes,
right.
yes.
In the world of business.
That's what maturity is.
Like that's ultimately what you're looking for. If you're an employer hiring an employee, or you're joining a company, it's like, I want to get out of this something, but I want to be able to deliver on what I say I'm going to do. And that's a difficult thing for a lot of adults to do in the world and space we live in. But like going back to the kids aspect of this, right, is understanding where that kind of defense mechanism that you talk about, the ego narrative that's just trying to keep me safe and keep me loved, and I don't really want to do things. And I think one thing I want to highlight with this is kids that have success early in sports, how difficult it is for them to continue to bridge that gap, because now at some point they're regarded as the best player on the team, or the best player in the league, or the best player in the state, right? I talk about that with me. It's very difficult to maintain that narrative, right? And it's very difficult to believe without having some form of imposter syndrome, which is probably caused by the stuff in the subconscious, right? That's like, I'm no longer safe if I don't achieve these things I say I want to do.
Right.
So how would you encourage parents to approach this situation or this conversation with their kids?
Yeah.
I like the way you framed it and how you work with your clients, but how would you encourage them to go about asking those questions, kind of lead them down that path?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, step number one for parents is to do it with themselves.
Yeah.
So step number one is to be able to sit there and ask yourself, when I say, what in myself do I say, and how do my actions, if we understand your actions actually define you, not, meaning like what you do in your life will tell you what you actually value, right? So that speaks something to the subconscious. So we have to examine that within ourselves, and then we can actually come to our kids, because remember, our kids will call us on this stuff. They will. They'll call us out immediately. They go, well, all you do is stare at your phone, Dad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. What, don't you hate your job, Dad? You know what I mean? And that's the thing. They'll call us out on that stuff. So they don't see us doing it. If my dream is to be this, but instead I go to a job that I hate every single day, then I have to close that gap within myself at some level. If I attest to some belief system that everything's going to be okay, and yet I'm worried all the time, then how can I actually teach that truth to my kids? Because the questions for the kids, again, is to get them to begin to observe their own ego, right? You go, hey, bud, you keep telling me you want to be this. What do your actions say you want to be?
Yeah.
Right. And just bringing those simple questions. And again, respectful of the developmental phase they're in. If he's 9, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Just if he's 9, just focus. If your child if she's 8 years old, then what she's trying to do is build a sense, am I safe? Am I secure? Leave her alone. Back up. Be that lighthouse. Be that safety. Be that security for her. Wait till she hits those phases. Wait till he hits those phases at 13, 14, 15, when he starts really saying, this is what I really want. Because at that phase, you can go, well, here's the deal. I can facilitate those actions. Do you want this or do you not want this? Like my son says, I want to be like Lionel Messi, but he's 10, right? So I go, oh, okay. And I said, well, if you want me to get you a trainer, I can get you a trainer if you want. And he says, no, because what does he want to do? He wants to go play video games. He wants to do this. He wants to just go, I'm safe, I'm secure, I'm okay, it's comfortable, everything. It's fine. But if he's 15 and he says that to me, that's different. When he says at 15, I want to be like Lionel Messi, I'll go, what do you want to do? And he'll be ready developmentally to go, I'll go, do you want to train? And he'll probably say yes. Because if he says, no, I just want to play video games at that level, then I have the ability, if I've done my own work, I have the ability to go, hey, son, like, I need you to see this. And just say, can we talk? And for my kids, I try to create situations that are fertile for listening. So if I know my daughter loves Starbucks, okay, she loves to get that she gets a strawberry drink, she loves that. If I go sit down and I go, hey, I always call it Dad tax. Okay. I need to talk to you for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I'll just go, I need 2 minutes of your attention. And then I'll go, you keep it. That what I would say at that level is, you say this is what you want, this is what you do. There's a gap here. Can you see it?
Yeah.
And that's it. Can you see it? Just trying to get them to see it. That's all.
Yeah.
But again, we have to be respectful of those developmental years. Everybody's trying to do this when our kids are 6, 7, 8 years old, when they're living in fantasy land by definition.
Yeah.
A kid looks at the TV and goes, I want to be just like him. Let him have his dream world.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to go do the training. He doesn't have to get a private trainer and get in the cage and get that going. You know what I mean? He doesn't. Let him have that fantasy for a while. Let him be that and wait for that warrior to emerge.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think with my own son, right, talks about wanting to play in the NBA. And again, this is a fantasy stage for him. I'm sitting back and saying, great, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. And not trying to impose well, you got to do this and you got to check these boxes. And then if you really want to get there, this is the path to success because he's 7 years old. Right. As you mentioned, there's a point in time where your kid is the one that really wants it. Right. And I think back to my childhood and the way my parents raised me. I didn't have to ask my dad didn't have to ask me to go outside and play baseball.
Yeah.
Right. It was like, I'm dragging my dad outside to play baseball and I will not stop until I catch 25 balls. And I think that's something that you see in some kids, right? In sports or school or in learning an instrument or whatever, they're just hyper focused on it and they really enjoy it. Now, part of me was looking to receive love, right? We've kind of unpacked that, but it was also really my passion. My dream was to be a Major League Baseball player. Yeah. And that was something that my parents didn't have to push upon me in any form, right? They just tried their best to facilitate it with all the other stuff that was going on in our family. And I'm grateful that I had a dad, right, who went to work early so that he could get off work early and be able to spend time with me. And that was a cycle he didn't experience that with his father, right? So that was something he's like, I'm going to be different in the sense of I'm going to prioritize the time after school for my kids to be able to spend time with them, playing sports, going camping, whatever it is, right, that brings the family joy. So again, grateful for all of our struggles as a family to have those experiences and be able to have that kind of awareness, right, with my own kids. Like you mentioned being on your phone. One of the hardest things to do is get home from a day of work and be present with your kids. And talk about the play experience and how it's difficult for a lot of parents to tap into that, right? Because everything is so structured and rigid as we're become adults. And again, that's really going back to the early stages of like, don't put this pressure on your kids way too young.
Yeah.
And then once that time comes, learn how to be the facilitator, not the coach, right?
Yeah.
Approach that conversation with grace and understanding of what your kid's going through and doesn't want to hear it from you. And I think parents that have older kids can relate to this as they get into their teenage years. It's like, they want nothing to do with me, right? How do we kind of bridge that gap? What do you think is the definition of acting like a pro?
Yeah, acting like a pro, when you know it when you see it, because you see someone whose actions match their words. And that's a very difficult bridge to build. It's a bridge between the conscious and the subconscious. And to do that, we call it maturity. Right. So it's kind of a rare thing to see. But most of that's because we don't adhere to actual developmental phases that people live in the sports world. We ignore the developmental years of a child and just pretend that they're like 16 when they're 9. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so we create a situation where the gap between the conscious and unconscious is actually bigger rather than smaller. So it's a difficult thing to bridge that gap. So the definition of it is someone who is able to build a bridge between the conscious and subconscious. What I say I want, I go after with my actions. What I say I believe, I show with my actions. What I say I'm going to do, I do. Yeah. Again, we call it maturity. It's actually awareness of myself as a conscious and an unconscious being. And to do that, kids need a really strong foundation. They need to know they are safe, they are loved no matter what. They need that at their core. And it's never too late to do it. I've watched clients that I've worked with. I worked with this one dad who had a 16-year-old son where he destroyed that relationship. Yeah. And once he started doing the work, he reversed it. In less than a year, his kid had come to start to trust him. And all of a sudden he can help his being invited into spaces within that kid. So a kid is building that bridge, and all of a sudden that kid's saying, I want to be a pro. And he's starting to actually take those actions on his own. Mm-hmm. It can be reversed. But it can't be. Parents are going to sit there and not have that awareness of themselves, where they're trapped in their head, constantly trying to fix their kids and make their kids act like a pro when they recognize it has to start with us. Yeah. Period.
Well, I love the way the question was framed. Do you need a dad or do you need a coach?
Yes.
Or do you need a mom or do you need a coach?
Yeah.
Right? And I think you can take this away from this podcast and utilize that in your daily interactions with your kids, because that is a very simple way of approaching a conversation and giving the kid a choice of what kind of response do I really need right now? Yeah.
And my kid will say, Dad, 99 times out of 100, he'll say, I just need a dad in this phase. But I guarantee when he's 16, he'll say something different.
Yeah. Which again, give your kids some time. Exactly. We'll dive deeper into this when we get back.
We can sum up all these podcasts by going, give them time. Yeah. Please, just give them some time.
We'll be back shortly. Thank you.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like Hero, an interactive guidebook taking parents of young athletes on a journey through their own experiences and perspectives, and how to approach the balance between being a loving parent and encouraging your child to push through challenges and excel in their endeavors. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.
Welcome back. How do you know what beliefs you hold in your unconscious?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's Maya Angelou. I think it might. She said, people they'll forget what you said, they'll forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Yep.
Really famous quote, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that they make you feel that way by doing something and saying something, right? So it's in people's actions where we see their unconscious behavior. I gave a talk one time and it was a religious group actually, and I was talking about this idea of trusting some sort of divine kind of figure. And I said, how many of you guys, trust God to provide for you? And they were like, oh, yeah. So well, how many of you guys worry about money? And everybody's like, yeah. You know what I mean? Like there was this kind of thing where, and we kept going with it. We kept pointing out different things where that shouted out this kind of gap between what we believe and what we actually believe. So if you watch how people behave, and if you're watching yourself, you watch how you behave. For instance, if I'm a parent on the sideline and I'm observing my thoughts to I want to coach my kid, if I do it, it's because that's where my unconscious stuff is coming out. The second I become aware of those thoughts and I'm able to make a choice that is opposite of that, and where my ego says coach the kid and I can say no, now I've started to bridge the gap between my conscious and unconscious. Now I'm actually a conscious being acting for the good of myself and my child. The goal is to come into the conscious world with our actions. Watch anybody's actions and you'll see what they actually believe. So you watch your kid and the kid goes, I want to be like Mbappe or whatever. And you go, oh, okay, well, let's do some training stuff. And they go, I don't want to do that. It's because they're unconscious beings when they're young. They don't actually want to be like Kylian Mbappe. They want stardom and they want the love that would come from that. And they want the fantasy and all that kind of stuff. And that's okay. When they're 17, 18, they say, I want that. That's when we can start to go, okay, let's build this bridge between your conscious and your unconscious and point that out. Because when they're, like that kid, eating pizza and drinking a Coke, not what they actually want. They're still kind of trapped in that same fantasy stage that they were as little ones.
Yeah. My son said, I want to be a famous basketball player. My other son said, I want to be a famous baseball player. I'm like, what does famous mean? And let me tell you, as somebody who's never as famous as the most famous people in sports, I experience fame on some level.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly uncomfortable, right? For a lot of people, because it's just a weird thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a concept that it's easy to subscribe, especially in that fantasy stage that we're talking about. But just for the people out there listening, like fame is not always the thing you really want to experience in your life, right? But being able to positively affect the people around you, your teammates, your space, the world, whatever your grand view is for yourself, that's way more important than having thousands of followers or millions of followers on social media or whatever fame definition you want to throw out there.
Well, if you look at kids, it's clear, right? It's just love.
Yeah.
Little ones want love, and they see fame, and they go, "That's love."
A lot of love,
and that's what it is. And of course, then when all that comes, then it's like to the older kids, then it feels like pressure.
Yeah, right. And then there's a lot of people who don't love you if you are loved. So again, it's a double-edged sword. We were talking earlier about the conception of your kid's potential. I think that's an important one for us to unpack a little bit further. It's like, how do parents become more aware of their conception of what their kid's potential is versus what is their actual potential?
Yeah. Well, we were talking about concerted breaking. It's really interesting because, it's when your mind is creating. Let's do some deductive reasoning for a second. Of all the kids in America that are playing youth sports, millions and millions and millions and millions of kids, what percentage, if you had to guess, are going to end up playing professional sports?
Less than 2%, 1% maybe.
Yeah, less than 1%. Yeah, it's like 0.001 or something like that. Right? So playing college is like 0.01. It's extremely rare. So we could just say, just like winning the lottery, your kid's not going to play at that level. Why does our brain always go there? Right? That is a great example of how our subconscious is functioning. Why does our mind constantly say they need to get better, they need to get better, they need to get better, at everything that they're doing? That's how our subconscious is functioning. And that's where, honestly, this is where we have to get into how parents hold their own trauma and how our own subconscious trauma is constantly being projected. And so that idea that this concept of potential, I say my kids could become this, right? And because we equate accomplishment to something to love, we equate it to safety, we equate it to security, where that's that caveman thing happening, this deep instinctual thing. That's why we create this potential thing in our brains. And rarely do we go, what's their potential for true peace and happiness? I mean, the dad we were kind of talking about earlier, they did the whole, do you need a coach right now or do you need a dad right now? What's one of the breakthroughs for him? One of the breakthroughs is when I remember posing this entire thing. I said, what if your kid ends up being like a PE teacher, but he's happy? And every time Christmas rolls around, he's excited to come home, to come and visit you with his kids. And he loves coming home for the holidays. And what would you be okay with that? And I had him do this whole picturing, and when they're like his kids in his mid-30s, and he was just like, it made him emotional. He realized like, that would be wonderful. Yeah. Right. Okay, let's hold that for a second. And then let's let everything you do in relationship to your elite athlete kid be as if that's his future. And it shifted everything about the way he actually dealt with the kid. And it shifted everything about the way he understands his kid's potential. He started thinking in terms of, what is my son's potential for peace and happiness and joy and the things that I'm actually pursuing now. Yeah. And that's really, I think if we shift towards that, I mean, I'm doing the same thing. I'm watching, why does my brain always go to my kids have to make some super high level? You know what I mean? And just working on releasing. So I'm doing my work. That's the key.
Yeah, which you kind of alluded to this next one, but how do we become more accepting of your child's potential?
Yeah, I think that so we understand in quantum physics, we understand that the concept of, it's called superposition, meaning your child's future, there are literally millions of outcomes, and they are all held in superposition, meaning equally possible. Right?
Yep.
The key to allowing your child to find the kind of where they were really meant to go is by releasing our need to control what that outcome is, to release it so that they can find where they were meant to be. What if we could ask the question that your kids, I mean, I told my son this yesterday, we were chatting about it. I said, son, you're the one question, there's only one question that matters in your life. He's like, what's that? I said, why are you here? You came here for a reason. You are in this life for a reason. Your job is to discover what that is. And maybe sports is a part of that. But the truth is, and I work with a lot of professional athletes, and those athletes, when they're very young, even if they achieve long careers, when they're super young, they have to stop, right? And in the end, we have to ask better questions about what potential means. Potential for what?
Yeah.
If it's just money, well, the rich people have been telling us for centuries that doesn't make you happy. Right. So we have to ask better questions of what is it we're actually wanting to achieve for our kids. What do we want them? And this is where we get back to breaking those cycles of the same old programming that if you achieve something of money and safety and security, then somehow you're going to be happy, because that's simply not true.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, as you know, working with athletes and high-level people in business, and I've been around this space now for a while, it's very easy for that perception of that dream and accomplishing your dream, and then the whole world is just sunshine and roses from there. And it's really not. It comes down to your relationships, your own, peace, joy, experience of the world that you live in, and how those relationships with the people that matter the most are positively and negatively affected. Right? Yes. I think we put so much pressure on the achievement without the focus. I love how you define potential: joy, happiness, right? Safety, love, like being able to look forward to spending time with your family when you get older and bringing your kids around. And I think that's a great takeaway for parents to understand, is let's start to shift that potential conversation into what's really going to fulfill our kids. Yeah. And it's not being a first round pick. It's not playing in the major leagues. Those are all great accomplishments that you can achieve in your life, but still not find that happiness. And that's what led me to working with you, right? And a big part of our work is that identity crisis, which again, the theme of all this is like, what are we here to do? Right? What makes me valuable? How can I impact the world in a way that's better than putting a jersey on my back and hitting a home run in front of 60,000 people? Feels great, but that feeling doesn't last forever, right? And I can only talk about that so many times before somebody's like, okay, dude, we got it.
Move on. Yeah.
So to wrap this up, I think we did a great job of this in the Athlete's Journal, which parents, please pick this copy up, get a copy of Hero, do it together. It's a special opportunity, right, to reframe this whole experience.
Yeah.
how can a player know what steps to take to become more like a pro?
Well, there's a lot of good information out there for one. But if this is up to the parents to facilitate. Parents facilitate kids having the space to be able to ask these questions at the right times and at the right stages in their life. When someone says, like when that one kid told me I want to be a pro as a soccer player, and I just asked him, so what'd you do today, to become like that? I was helping facilitate his own kind of inquiry. And that's the whole thing. Our process is to guide our kids into the life that they're meant to live. Isn't a matter of controlling them. If you want them to act like a pro, I had one player, ask me about that, how to become like a pro. And I simply said, I gave him your number. I said, well, I know one that can give you some good advice, why don't you get on the phone with him? And he did that. Now the question is, I said, so what did he tell you to, and I asked him, what did he tell you to do? It's this, did you do it? No. Okay, there you go. So a part of you wants to be a pro and a part of you does not. A part of you is seeking that type of safety and comfort. Yeah. Right. And that's we have to do this. So when it comes to acting like a pro, we have plenty of information. We got plenty of examples. We got plenty of things. You can Google how to become a professional baseball player and just myriads of information is available. The question is what do we do with that? It is our actions that define us in the end.
Yeah. And I think, again, as we're trying to bottle all this up, right? It's really good for parents to understand it's got to be your child that wants it and not you. And that's a difficult thing as parents to release that sense of control and understand we really don't have that control. Yeah. We have an opportunity to be the light, to be the one who models the behavior and do the work on ourselves, but also give your kids the space and grace, right? To be able to experience things. And decide what it is they really, really want to do. Yeah. And not put that pressure on them at 7, 8 years old and say, well, we got to have discipline, we got to have grit, and it's got to be grind. It's like, no, that's doing the opposite. Yeah. Right? In a lot of ways, parents have been forced into this space and then adopted that mindset because that's what's been normalized. And again, the whole mission of this logo and this production of what we're putting here is really bring light to this situation and say there's so many beautiful things that sports can teach us if we have the right awareness. And go get Hero, go get the Athletes Journal. You're obviously started by listening to this, but again, we're here to help facilitate the deeper conversation and the bigger shift that needs to take place so that you have healthier, happier athletes that ultimately achieve the potential that we talked about, not in sports, but in life. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us and look forward to the next one.
Yeah.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like 3A Sports Journals. Many athletes don't journal because they simply don't know how it can be helpful to their process. Elite athletes around the world use journaling from an early age to help them face the tough challenges of sports. If your kids want to go from good to great, they need to learn how to journal. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.